and welcome to the City Club Forum. I'm Annette Butler, President of the City Club. On this, the 63rd anniversary of the birth of the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, we welcome to our podium Senator Edward M. Kennedy, that president's youngest brother, the Democratic senator from Massachusetts, and the man who may become the 40th President of the United States. This man, among other things, is unique and determined. Unique in that he has managed to alter 64 years of City Club tradition by addressing our first breakfast forum. Determined in that despite formidable odds in unseating an incumbent, Senator Kennedy has challenged traditional concepts of party unity myths and hung in this race, defying political polls, a sometimes unpopular press, and a 734-person deficit in the delegate vote count. Senator Kennedy has served this country in the Senate since 1962, nearly 20 years. He is best known legislatively as a strong sponsor and advocate of national health insurance for everyone, and serves as the chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on Health. Also, he has been a consistent supporter of aid for Israel and the Jewish state, of federal jobs programs for the unemployed, and of tax incentives to help businesses modernize to meet foreign competition. Originally, Senator Kennedy announced that he would make a major address regarding foreign policy. He has changed. He will tell you what that is. Let's hear Senator Kennedy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Annette Butler, for your kind words of introduction and presentation. We meet today at a time that reminds us again of the senseless violence that stalks our land. This morning, Vernon Jordan, one of the truly great civil rights leaders of our generation, lies critically wounded in Fort Wayne, Indiana. As a nation, we can ill afford to lose his leadership in the common struggle to create a brighter future for our nation. I've known Vernon Jordan. I've worked with him on countless issues and occasions, and I know that he is a powerful voice for justice and equality in our society. And because of Vernon Jordan, America today has a deeper understanding of the evils of discrimination and injustice. And because of Vernon Jordan, the dream of civil rights lives on. And because of Vernon Jordan, America in 1980 is a better land. It has been said that when we see the darkness, it reminds us of the light. And all of us now pray for Vernon Jordan's early recovery, and let us rededicate ourselves to the great cause he seeks to advance, so that this country may at last become a society where all people share fully in that equality, which is the real American promise. I had intended to speak with you about foreign policy, but President Carter is also coming to Cleveland today, and his visit raises a fundamental issue of the democratic process. Mr. Carter will spend this evening in the city. He is plainly campaigning for the Ohio presidential primary. So I have chosen this time and this place to discuss the character of the campaign, what it means for our political system and the future of this country. For many months, Mr. Carter has denied the voters in state after state the opportunity to hear a debate and to shape an informed judgment at the polls. Behind all the excuses and the evasions, there is an obvious truth. Mr. Carter's decision on debate has been a matter of political convenience from the very beginning. He was pressing for a debate when he was far behind last November. He was willing to debate for the first 60 days that the hostages were held in Iran. I was ready to join him then in the first forum of 1980, even though I was ahead in virtually every poll and primary, because I regard debate as the essence of our democracy. I agreed last November, and I agree now with Jimmy Carter of 1976, who said, "I believe the candidates have an obligation to meet in debate before the people of America." In 1980, Mr. Carter has shirked that obligation. He will shirk it again today, here in Cleveland. He declined the invitation of the Cleveland Press to add 1 hour to his 5 hours of campaigning in this city for a face-to-face discussion of the issues. 2 weeks ago, I renewed my challenge to Mr. Carter to give the Democrats of Ohio and the nation the right to an open and honest debate. I put my candidacy on the line. I pledged that following a debate, I would treat the June 3rd primaries as the decisive vote of this campaign. Mr. Carter responded with a new reason for his silence. He spoke of party unity, something he did not value as much in 1972 when he led a rearguard fight against a certain nominee of the Democratic Party. That is not my purpose in seeking a debate in 1980. In fact, a debate is the one means of fairly settling the issues between the candidates and effectively assuring the unity of Democrats. To their credit, the Republicans debated this year, not once, but many times. This did not divide their party. Instead, a sense of fairness has brought Republicans together. All of them can accept the outcome because each candidate had a chance to be measured against the others. Only in debate can Democrats define common ground on which we can stand truly united this year. No matter who the Democratic nominee is, he will fail unless the Democratic Party states and debates policies that offer a real and present prospect of progress. Falsely united, our party will be surely defeated in the fall. 4 years ago, the President spoke often of a government close to the people. But for the first 6 months of this campaign, he remained behind the walls of the White House, far from the people. He converted his foreign policy mistakes into political triumphs, and he cloaked himself in patriotism, and he and his surrogates proclaimed that any other discussion of what was best for America was unpatriotic and un-American. He turned the greatest strength of the American people, their love of country, to his electoral gain. Our citizens will proudly sacrifice jobs, economic security, and even their lives for the defense of the nation. This year, in the primaries, they were told to sacrifice their chance for a better economic future, to support the President despite his policies, in order to signal their support for the hostages and their opposition to Soviet aggression. Two questions on which there has been no disagreement from any candidate. A month ago, Mr. Carter finally announced that he was coming out of the White House because the crises were suddenly manageable. Even though the hostages are still in Iran after 207 days and the Soviets are still in Afghanistan after 152 days. So now Mr. Carter emerges occasionally from the Rose Garden for prearranged events which his policies meet no serious challenge. After depriving 2/3 of the Democratic primary voters of open debate and an informed choice on grounds that he could not be partisan in a time of national unity, he now deprives the remaining third of the voters of that debate and that choice on the grounds that he already has a partisan advantage. He professed to be disinvolved in politics for months, even while he was phoning a host of politicians in every primary state and bestowing a host of federal grants on favored supporters. Now he is taking the voters of Ohio for granted, along with all the other voters who have yet to cast their ballots. He has offered the shadow of a candidacy without the substance of a campaign on the issues. The real losers in this kind of campaign are the American people, the citizens of this state and this city. Mr. Carter will not answer their real and painful concerns. He does not want to explain why 12,000 auto workers in Ohio lost their jobs in April alone. He does not want to discuss why his administration has done nothing to stem the tide of runaway industry. He does not want to account for a 38% inflation in Ohio in the last 3 years. He does not want to be asked in honest debate about the layoffs at the Ford plant in Brook Park, the closing of the Firestone rubber plant in Dayton, and the closing of the U.S. Steel plant in Youngstown. He does not want to answer whether he has a program to reindustrialize America, because he has none. He does not want to debate the economic alternatives I have presented in specific detail, because his only solution to failure is more of the same. He does not want to say what happened to his pledge made in this state 4 years ago to achieve a balanced budget and inflation and unemployment of 4% by 1980. The people of Ohio now realize how false this promise was. You have seen inflation and interest rates of 20% and the highest federal deficit in history. He may now be entering the deepest recession since the Great Depression half a century ago. It is no wonder that Mr. Carter is afraid to debate, for the only record he has to offer is record inflation, record interest rates, record unemployment in basic industries such as steels, autos, and record setbacks in foreign policy. So instead of engaging in forthright discussion, he's left the voters to listen to the sounds of silence. A rose curtain has descended across the 1980 campaign. And from behind that curtain, the President has put forth his message of malaise, raising and reinforcing doubts about the capacity of any national leadership to deal with our national problems. He has sought to convince us that we cannot do better and that no president can make a real difference. If Mr. Carter can lower the expectations of the nation, he may persuade the people to accept his own lower standard of performance in the presidency. But nothing could be more dangerous in a declining economy and a difficult world than to tell Americans that events will continue out of control. An America which believes in the permanence of economic crisis will become a nation divisible, with liberty and justice only for some, with tension and apprehension for all. And an America which believes in the inevitability of its own weakness abroad will be tempted to extremism and isolationism in its foreign policy. I became a candidate in 1980 and I continue in this campaign, because I have deep concerns about the condition of our country, the drift of our politics, and the direction of the Democratic Party. What is at stake now is not merely the personal gain of any individual, but the pain of a declining economy and the loss of American self-confidence at home and abroad. I have seen the people across the length and breadth of this land for the last 7 months, and I know that they are hurting. I have listened to them through all the time the President has been isolated from them. And for the American people, life today is no rose garden. Jimmy Carter and I have only a candidacy to win or lose. 220 million Americans have a future to be won or lost for themselves and for their families. And Mr. Carter and I share a duty to permit them a fair chance to decide. We have a duty beyond self-interest. We have a duty to the Democratic Party and the democratic process, which is based on the principle that the people should see the alternatives clearly before they go to their polling places. It makes a mockery of democracy to tell the Americans to cast their ballots with a blindfold on. They have been blindfolded through the primary campaign, which is the proper place for a debate among Democrats to be joined and judged. A decade ago, the rules of the Democratic Party were reformed to assure that the issues and the outcome of a presidential campaign would be determined by popular will, not political maneuver. Mr. Carter has subverted the purpose of the reforms. His retreat from an open campaign and his refusal to engage in open debate have left us with a nationwide smoke-filled room. So today, I again challenge Mr. Carter to debate. And I challenge him to debate at any place, at any time in the next 5 days, so that the issues can be resolved in the June 3rd primaries. But if he continues to run for re-election by running from the public dialogue, I will ask the Democratic voters to send Jimmy Carter a clear message on June 3rd, that a candidate who will not debate is a candidate who should not be nominated. If a candidate If a debate is denied in the last week of the primaries, it must be held before the balloting at the Democratic Convention. and I will regard June 3rd vote as a referendum on whether Democrats want a fair debate and a free choice. If I prevail, I will continue to call for a debate. Following that debate, I will release my delegates to cast their votes in accordance with their conscience, and I hope Mr. Carter will do the same. I recognize that it is harder for him to accept this proposal than it is for me to make it. But the integrity of our party and the democratic process matters more than the number of our delegates or the success of our own ambitions. I have not done as well as I had hoped in this campaign. I realize better than anyone else the odds against my nomination. But I believe that the issues are vital, that they must be debated, and that afterwards every delegate should be permitted the freedom of conscience to support any candidate. The convention should be at liberty to nominate Mr. Carter, to nominate me, or to select a third person. And I am not afraid of their decision or their conscience. To those who fear freedom of conscience, Democrats must reply, if you cannot persuade a majority of delegates after a fair debate and at a free convention in August, how can you hope to persuade a majority of Americans in a free election next November? We now know Mr. Carter's answer. If he is the nominee, he apparently hopes to be reelected by rerunning his non-campaign in the primaries, by once again fleeing the public dialogue and frustrating the democratic process. 2 days ago, the White House press secretary announced that while the president would debate Ronald Reagan in the fall, he would refuse to debate John Anderson. It is absurd to pretend that Mr. Anderson is not a major candidate. According to one national poll, he already leads Mr. Carter in the states that are the heartland of the Democratic Party, the states that have a Democratic nominee that a Democratic nominee must carry to win a general election. Any Democrat who is nominated this year should agree to debate both John Anderson and Ronald Reagan, and I will do so if I am the nominee. I say this for the same reason that I have demanded a debate in the primaries and that I've agreed to one long ago when Mr. Carter was far behind and it was not to my political advantage. The voters have a right in the primaries and in the general election to see all the serious candidates together, to hear them answer for their policies, to weigh their records and to test their ideas. The process belongs to the people, not to any president or any nominee who can undermine it to his own uses. No Democratic nominee should ever have to rely on an undemocratic process to secure a dubious victory. So this is the cause I carry with me across the continent during the last week of the primary campaign. If you want to send a message against the Carter policies of inflation, recession, and high interest rates, of mounting dangers overseas to both peace and our national security, then give me your vote on June 3rd. If you want to demand a Democratic Party that is faithful to its principles, then vote on June 3rd for the most vital principle of our party, that an informed people should have a free voice in determining their own destiny. If you believe that the ballots cast June 3rd and next November should truly set the course of the nation, then vote to demand a debate within the Democratic Party and a debate among all the major candidates this fall. After 7 months, I am more certain than ever that this campaign is an effort that must be made. It involves not only my candidacy, it involves the cause of all Democrats who believe in economic democracy and social justice, and of all Americans who believe in an open society and an open politics. I'm not prepared to see the party of the people become indifferent to their anguish and their apprehension. I'm not prepared to hear the party of Franklin Roosevelt tell America that the only thing we have to fear is the future itself. And I'm not prepared to have the party of John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson and Hubert Humphrey and George McGovern, who all debated in their campaigns, become the party that now muffles debate in the election of 1980. And I'm not prepared to withdraw from this race And I believe... I believe that it can be won and that it must be run for the good of our party and our country. This is a campaign for families who can no longer make ends meet on middle incomes, for the minority who are not white and the majority who are women, who still bear the burdens of discrimination. It is a campaign for the security of the elderly and the opportunity of the young. It is a campaign for the revival of our economy and the restoration of our role in the world. It is a campaign for all the values and all the hopes that alone can sustain our faith in the democratic process. Every great leader of the Democratic Party in the past has understood that a political party must stand for something. Now we must take our stand inside our party. On June 3rd, let us bring the public dialogue back to the campaign, and let us give our party and this election back to the people. And above all else, let us offer new hope for America in 1980. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. We're going to go right into our question and answer period. We have two microphones, one in the front with Bob Conrad and one in the rear, and I can't see it. Bob Cavano. Will you make sure you raise your hand to be recognized?
Introduce my sister Jean, Jean Kennedy Smith. I think you all know Mr. Hagan as well. Pretty good hand you got, Tim, for this our group here this morning.
Mr.
Fine,
Kennedy.
I'll do the best we can. Fine. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Kennedy, speaking about the debates, if you are the Democratic nominee in November, and the League of Women Voters of America do sponsor the TV debates, would you be willing to come to Cleveland to debate?
Yes.
Please say yes.
Yes. Before you go any further, yes. Just give me the date, and we'll be glad to look forward to it. As I mentioned, I do think that it is important that in the fall that there be the debate and discussion between the Democratic nominee and Mr. Anderson, if he makes the final judgment decision to make the race, and Mr. Reagan. Yes, sir.
In your opinion, are the three most important issues on which you and President Carter disagree, and why should your view prevail on June 3rd?
First of all, on the economy, he believes in a high interest rate policy and high rate of unemployment, and I think that that is myself a bankrupt and inadequate response. I've proposed a freeze and then putting in place programs to increase productivity, competition, and foreign sales. Secondly, I would say in the area of foreign policy, I think we've lurched from crisis to crisis, constantly responding to challenges overseas. I think we need a foreign policy that reflects both the claws of the American eagle, one that has arrows, the other the olive branch. We have to have a foreign policy that is firm and strong, predictable, certain, that builds upon the relationship with our allies and has the confidence of our allies and the respect of our adversaries. And we also have to be a country which is going to try and move back the possibilities of nuclear confrontation, nuclear war, and nuclear escalation. Third, I believe Mr. Carter favors in the energy area, favors nuclear power as number one, coal as number two. I favor coal as number one. Finally, let me just say, you didn't ask for the fourth, but let me give you what I believe that it is. Fourth, I have a very fundamental different view, and this is very basic, and I think is very important. I have a fundamental different view of the role of the presidency than Mr. Carter. I know the institution, I've been close to it, I've read history. I believe individual presidents can make a difference. I believe within my own party that, within the Republican Party, obviously Abraham Lincoln. In the Democratic Party, clearly Franklin Roosevelt. I think Harry Truman, that moved us from a wartime economy to a peacetime economy. I think John Kennedy in the conquer of space. I think when Lyndon Johnson said, and when I was there in the joint meeting of the House and Senate, that we shall overcome, those brief words set across this country the fact that the most important office in this land was committed to full equality and the elimination of discrimination in this nation. A president can make a difference. A president can set the vision for this country, establish the goals for this nation, galvanize the forces within this country, the talented, successful men and women from all different parts of this country. A president can work effectively with the Congress of the United States and regain control over our own destiny in the area of economy, energy, and foreign policy. And I reject completely the idea that this country is in a spirit of malaise, and I reject completely that a president cannot make an important difference about the future direction of this nation. And those would be the four areas in which I would mention.
Senators, many voters are open to persuasion due to lack enthusiasm for President Carter. So many events can change the situation. Would you agree with me then after June the 3rd, I wish you all the luck. If you fail in this election for the benefit of the party, would you compromise like Bush compromised with Reagan?
Well, I'm not sure Bush compromised with Reagan. Seemed, I respect the campaign that Mr. Bush ran, and I thought he brought credit upon himself and the members of the Republican Party. And as I referred in my statement earlier today, the Republican Party was able to bring that sense of unity because they did have a dialogue, they did have a debate, they did have a discussion. Each of the Republicans were able to present their views. They started in New Hampshire, they debated in Iowa, New Hampshire, Houston, and in other meetings. And they developed the consensus within the Republican Party, which has been the basis for their bringing their party together again. You could eliminate my candidacy, and you're still going to find the auto workers in Ohio, steel workers in Ohio, the school teachers in this city. You're going to find strong differences within the party about why we ask some groups to sacrifice school lunch programs, and we don't ask other groups to address the issue of intangible drilling costs in the major oil companies. Those issues are going to remain, whether my candidacy, I am a candidate or not. And the way you bring about unity within a party is to fashion and shape the kinds of response that are going to address the central concerns of people in this nation. That is what I'm committed to. That's what I run, why I run for. I believe I can make a difference. I believe because I would address those concerns. But I do believe that it is essential that the party respond to those central concerns. Then you're going to be able to find the basis for unity in the fall. But I am convinced that if the Democratic Party is going to be a pale carbon copy for Mr. Reagan, that the people of this country are going to choose the real thing and not a carbon copy. And that is the issue that we have to address. But I'm planning to be successful on June 3rd in any way. So I guess we'll take a couple of more. I know the hour is late. I made you all late.
Senator Kennedy, in the critical areas of Iran and Afghanistan, what that has not been done could you offer?
In response to, let's take the Afghanistan. I mean, I think we could go back and speculate whether under a Kennedy presidency we would have a situation of hostages given the warnings that were given to administration, and we can benefit from 20/20 hindsight. I believe that we have to address the issue today now, which is pursuing diplomatic options not ruling out other options, but continuing to pursue the diplomatic options. I think we can and will, at some time in the future, be able to examine the degree of warnings that were given to this administration that led up to the seizing of the hostages, and there's increasing evidence about the nature of the warning that was given to Mr. Carter. On Afghanistan, the response of the United States was the Carter Doctrine. Now, I'd welcome individuals in here to explain to me what the Carter Doctrine was or is today. It brought the Congress of the United States on its feet, stomping, that night when it was announced. And I haven't heard another word about the Carter Doctrine, with the exception that after the Carter Doctrine was announced, that, and this was some evidently statement or comment that the United States was going to beef up its conventional force, which all of us agree with regards to the Persian Gulf. There's no different disagreement on that, particularly when we have hostages held. But what does it mean with regards to commitment of American personnel in that part of the world? What did it mean with regards to that? The French and the Europeans, who have a greater interest and stake in the flow of oil through the Straits of Hormuz, what was their reaction? The French refused to meet with the American Secretary of State. The Germans said the United States are going alone. Pakistan, that was offered hundreds of millions of dollars of your tax money in economic and military aid, turned it down. And Saudi Arabia, 2 days later, went and raised your home heating bill. Now, it seems to me that in fashioning and shaping a solution to the dangers of Soviet hegemony in that part of the world, that we have common interests with Western Europe and Japan, and they ought to be responsive to the United States. They were there at the Berlin blockade, Berlin Wall, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they ought to be responsive to the United States. In Western Europe and Japan, we have common interests. The countries in that part of the world ought to be responsive. It's their security that's at stake. And it seems to me that leadership in the free world and by the United States should have been able to galvanize the forces of Western Europe and Japan, who have more to lose and risk than the United States does, and that the countries in those areas which have their own sovereignty to lose. And it seems to me that whatever policy that we're going to have within that part of the world demands that we have that kind of cooperation, that kind of support, and that kind of strength before we're going to start to seeing your sons and daughters sent to that part of the world. Those our allies and those that have an interest in that part of the world ought to be prepared and willing to defend it as well. And I think that is essential. I think there are other steps which can be done. The formation of a strategic reserve. In the budget, one of the principal areas of elimination. I think we need it. I strongly support what Senator Jackson is doing in that area. I deplore the fact that the Saudis will not sell us oil for the strategic reserves. They've warned the United States. And I think there's no question that the administration's been responsive to that in its budget recommendations and failing to do it. The Germans and the Japanese have it. The United States should have it. I think the time is. I want to just thank you very much for the chance. You must take 15 minutes. They tell me we're still on the radio, but you ever seen a politician turn down free radio time? The point of challenge is whether I outrage our group that's here today or whether I talk to the radio audience and make them later. Let me just say, I want to, these are proposals that I mentioned this morning. I believe very deeply. I welcome the chance to come to your organization to be able to present them. I thank you for your courtesy in listening to those views and your attentiveness, and I welcome the chance to be able to respond to some of those questions. And I just urge you to, as I know you do, to take seriously the concerns that all Americans must have about this city and about making it a livable place for the people that inhabit it, and to make sure that our country is going to continue to be a source of hope and inspiration for our children and our children's children, and a source of inspiration for countries throughout the world. Thank you very, very much.
This City Club Forum is now adjourned.